What's up guys? Welcome back to the Bonsai YouTube channel. I'm Josh and today we're going to be teaching you how to get a better deal when you buy bonsai and show you some tips and tricks on how you can save some money. So stick around. Alright, so on the private sellers market at the moment in bonsai, there's this stigma around bonsai that just because it's got the word bonsai attached to it, it's worth a lot of money. And there's a lot of people out there trying to take advantage of this fact. I've seen people that have paid $10 for a tree, $6 for a pot, and uploaded on the internet for $180. Now that kind of thing's just not on, and what I'm going to do today is take you guys through a few things that you can look for in bonsai and determine whether that tree is worth a lot of money or it's worth nothing. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing is kind of obvious, but we're going to look at the stage of development that the tree is in. Is this tree just a seedling? Is it a sapling? Pre-bonsai? Is this a cutting? What is it? Is it a bonsai in an actual bonsai container? Okay, all of these things, all these trees have different price ranges. Now, with your pre-bonsai stock, you need to look if it's been actually grown as a bonsai. Otherwise, if it hasn't and it hasn't been touched, you can go and buy that stock at a regular nursery for probably half the price that that person's asking for, okay? And that kind of stuff's just not worth a lot of money anyway. You know, we're talking about things that are worth money, a bonsai that have been worked on for a long time and somebody's put a lot of effort into them. Something that's just been grown in a container, not worth a whole lot of money. So just try and have a look at what stage that tree is in on its bonsai journey. Okay, so the next thing would be, if it is an actual bonsai in a bonsai pot, how much is the pot worth? Now, there's a lot of cheap production Chinese pots on the market, and I mean, nothing against these pots. These are great for beginners to get into the hobby and start to play around with repotting and all that without breaking the bank. We do need these markets of pots there, because if you think about bonsai, if everything was super expensive, nobody would get into the art, and that just wouldn't be cool. So having the cheaper stuff around, there's no problem with that. What I do have a problem with though is people putting a cutting in a cheap Chinese pot and asking top dollar for it. So when you go in to look at a tree, if it is a finished bonsai, take notice of the bonsai pot. Is it an antique Chinese pot, which would be worth a lot of money? Is it a Tokoname pot? Is it a good quality pot that was made in Japan? Is it a good quality pot that was made by a well-known ceramicist? Or maybe it's just a good quality pot that's made by a ceramicist that's a little more unknown, but it's still just a high quality pot. There are a lot of unknown ceramicists out there who make quality work. So take notice of the bonsai pot, see the quality of it. You can tell a cheap Chinese pot from a mile away. It has really rough lines, has rough clay, all that kind of stuff. You can just tell that it's not quality, it's not straight, the glazes are really crappy, all that kind of stuff. You can always tell a good quality pot. But straight up, just ask the person, where did you get that pot and what do you know about it? The other thing you can do is check the bottom of the pot. The good quality pots will always have what we call a chop mark under there, which is basically like the maker's mark. If it's in Japanese or Chinese or all that kind of stuff, there is a really good website out there. I'll see if I can find it and leave it in the description down below, a link to it. But there's a guy that actually shows you all the different chop marks of well-known ceramicists. So you can look it up and kind of get a valuation of what that pot's worth. Okay, so the next thing that I'd be looking at is the soil medium that the tree is in. Okay, so if it's in a black plastic pot, if it's, you know, a seedling or a sapling, cutting, pre-bonsai, it's definitely going to be in just a general nursery mix, a development mix, which is okay. But we're talking about bonsai here, okay? So if you're going to buy a finished bonsai, have a look at the mix. What's it in? If it's in a really cheap, crappy garden mix, I wouldn't put any value on it, okay? But if it's in a good quality inorganic substrate, like Akadama, pumice, perlite, zeolite, scoria, all those kinds of things, any kind of mixes of those, as long as it's, the proper mix for the tree, then that'll put the price up a little bit. Not only is that substrate worth a little bit more, but the tree is going to be worth a little bit more because it's going to grow better, it's going to have better foliage, and it's just going to be overall more healthier for the tree, okay? And it's going to be a more professional tree in the long run if it's in the proper substrate. So you can add a little bit more value to the tree if the artist has done the right thing. And you can straight up just ask the person who's selling the tree, what substrate's it in and why did you put it in that substrate? They should be able to tell you what the mix is, what the ratio is, and the reason behind it, okay? We know that substrates change even from state to state here in Australia. What they use down in Melbourne is going to be different to what we use here in New South Wales. What we use here in New South Wales is different to what they're going to use up in Queensland. But you can ask that person why they put it in that mix and what the results were that they were trying to achieve. That'll give you an idea of, how much you should be paying for that tree. Okay, so the next thing, we should be looking at the trunk quality. And this can be things like the bark that's on the trunk, the movement that's in the trunk, and sometimes the thickness of the trunk. But I don't want you to get too hung up on the thickness of the trunk, okay? Sure, a big thick trunk can be, impressive, but it's not everything in a bonsai. You can buy a tree that's got a really thin, slender trunk, but it's had all the right work done to it. It's got beautiful branching, it's got beautiful foliage, it's in a beautiful pot, and it can be worth 10 times more than a tree that's sitting right next to it with a big fat trunk. If you're going to buy a tree with a big girthy trunk, you've got to take into account the branching, the health of the tree, the foliage, the pot, everything. Don't just look at a big thick trunk and say that tree is worth a lot of money. Because guess what? It might not be. If we're talking about bonsai here, we want to see everything that, is a bonsai in that tree. We don't want to just see a big thick stump and then somebody says, oh, that's worth $500, because it's just not true. So look at things like the bark characteristics, okay? So if you've got a Japanese black pine, for example, and it's got really big, thick, corky bark on it, you're likely looking at quite an old tree. If it hasn't barked up and got that really corky bark on it yet, it's probably still quite a young tree. And same with things like Japanese maple, for example. If you're looking at a really green trunk, then it's likely a really young tree. But if you're looking at a trunk that's got a little bit of bark texture to it and it's that whitish colour, then you're likely looking at a fairly old tree. So you can kind of make an estimate, on price given the tree's age just by looking at the bark. And then some other things you want to look at is the nabari, so the root flare down low on the trunk. Have you got a nice root flare down there, or is there nothing happening? Has the artist put a lot of work into creating a really nice root flare like this? Or is it just a round trunk coming out of the soil? So check that out. Is there really nice movement down low in the trunk? Because we all know that if we've got a really thick trunk, that's something that we can't fix, is the movement. So take a look at the movement down low in the trunk, and that'll help you determine what price you should be paying for that tree. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is obvious flaws in the tree. And as I mentioned in the last video when I was working on this tree, it's not likely that you're ever going to go and look at a tree that's got no flaws, okay? We strive for perfection, but a lot of time we don't get there. And if you do go and look at a tree and it's got 0 flaws, you're probably going to be paying top dollar for it. But there are some really obvious things that you can look out for and try to avoid. So things like inverse taper. So a tree that's thick at the bottom comes up, gets thinner, but then suddenly gets thicker again and then goes thinner again. Really unsightly and really undesirable in a bonsai. So see if there's any inverse taper on it. The next thing you can look for is really undeveloped branching. So the branching on the tree, once again, you can have a really thick trunk that they've been, growing as a trunk chop stump, and then they've just let branches grow out of it. Now those branches are undeveloped. They're going to need a lot of work to make that tree a bonsai. So look for undeveloped branches. If there are developed branches on there, look for really heavy wire bite, especially on deciduous trees. Things like Japanese maples, if there's heavy wire bite on those branches, you're likely going to have to cut those branches back and start again, if you want a really top quality bonsai, that is. And then also to look at the foliage. Is the foliage really healthy, or is it looking really unhealthy? Is it yellow and got black spots all through it and all those kinds of things? Look for pests and all that other stuff on the tree that's really obvious, okay? And you know, if you spot these things and you really want the tree, you could probably drive the price down a bit by actually showing that you know what you're talking about and mentioning those things. Alright, and then just to make this a really quick video for today, the last thing I'm going to say is just look for really taboo styling in a tree. And what I mean by that is when we practice bonsai, there's a lot of work that's got to go into actually making it look like a bonsai aesthetically. And this takes a lot of work from an artist. And if you find, you know, I see it time and time again on the private market where somebody will just buy a juniper, put some S-bends in it, throw it in a cascade pot, call that a bonsai, and try and sell it for top dollar, okay? You know, there's a difference between that and an actual cascading juniper that's had pads built up, some really nice movement, it's in a nicer pot, all that kind of stuff, really healthy foliage. So look for taboo styling. So that's stuff that just doesn't make sense and it really doesn't look like a bonsai. Just because it's got bonsai next to it doesn't mean it's worth a lot of money. I can't stress that enough. So what I'm going to do is, over on our website, we actually have a premium blog, and I'll leave a link down below so you can access a 7-day free trial so you don't have to pay anything for it. Go and check out our article that's over there, and it's called The Rules of Bonsai. Let's call them guidelines, okay? And that's an article that I released a while ago that's got a full list of what we call the bonsai rules, but we actually call them guidelines because they're rules. You don't have to stick to them. But what we've got is a big list of guidelines, and these are generally the things that in the big shows around the world and exhibitions, people look for and mark a good quality bonsai off on this list of stuff. And this is things like no inverse taper, no crossing branches, and you know, just the way, the angle of the tree, how it's planted, all that kind of stuff. So there's a big list of that stuff in there. Go in, print it out, and that way you can take it with you when you go and buy bonsai, and you can kind of look at the tree, look at that list, and see if they've actually done any of that stuff. See if it breaks any of those rules, and you can try and drive the price down from there. Now, they're probably not going to like that you're, you know, falling back on these rules, quote unquote rules, let's call them guidelines. But the thing is, in Japan, when they have the big shows, these are the things that they look for in a top quality tree. And if the trees are breaking any of these, then it's not going to get marked as high as another tree will. So you can use this as a basic guideline for pricing, and you can just say to somebody, look, this has got crossing branches, or it's got this or that, I'm going to have to fix it. So can we maybe do a deal on this tree because there's a lot of work that's got to be done. It's like buying a car. You go to buy a car and you say, well, look, you know, it needs a water pump and it needs this and that. Maybe can we take, you know, X amount of money off because I've got to fix those things, and you can make a deal like that. So I hope those things have helped you today. Definitely jump over onto the blog, sign up for the free 7-day trial and check out those guidelines. And there's one other thing that I want to mention, and something that is not a rip-off, and that's our bonsai merchandise. Jump over to www.bonsaiandmerch.com. I'll leave a link down in the description below where you can check out some of our awesome t-shirt designs. We've also got things like coffee mugs, tumblers, stickers, hoodies. We've even got baby onesies, all those kind of things. Go over there, check it out. It helps you support us, and it helps us make more videos for you. So go and check out that bonsai merchandise. I'll leave the link down in the description below. I'll also leave the link down there for the free 7-day trial. Go over there, download those guidelines, print them out, save yourself some money. So that's it, guys, for today's video. Until next time, enjoy your bonsai journey.